I've been saying through the years that God has sent me. I tell you, one day you will know it. In the meantime, let me now tonight explain what I came to do and who responds. In the words of Browning, he said, "Truth is within ourselves. It takes no rise from outward things, no matter what you believe. There is an inmost center in us all, where truth abides in fullness, and to know rather consists of opening out a way whence the imprisoned splendor may escape, than in effecting entry for a light supposed to be without." Paracelsus. So if truth is within us, and I am speaking the truth, you will know it. Everyone who receives it and believes it, they will know it. One who will not receive it will not know it now, but they will eventually know it. So in the words of John, and John in the 17th chapter, and Jesus is speaking to his Father. In these words he said, "I have given them the words thou gavest me, and they have believed that thou didst send me." Verse 8. These you will read in the 17th of John. Now what I told you is this. I stood in the presence of the risen Lord. He wore the human form divine of infinite love. He embraced me and incorporated me into his body. I became one body, one form with the risen Lord, one Spirit, one Lord, one God and Father of all. F4:4. But he who sent me, although the same Lord, for there's only one Lord, did not wear the form of love. He wore the form of might, almightiness. After he embraced me and incorporated me into his body of love, I then stood in the presence of almightiness. Man, for God is man, and his every attribute is personified. It takes man to be the agent of every attribute of God. So then I stood in the presence of infinite might, which is power, and it was he who said to me, "Time to act," and dispatched me. I was sent into this world to tell the story of God as infinite power, not love. I refer to love, but were I not first incorporated into the body of love, it would be the most horrible thing in the world to possess such power not restrained by love. One is first incorporated into the body of love before they are dispatched by the same God wearing the body of power. So here I was, sent to tell the world of the infinite power of God, and I tell you, that power is our own wonderful human imagination. It's beyond the wildest dreams of man, who monkeys around with nuclear powers. Oh yes, I could destroy New York City, but is that power? Suppose you had a power where you could take New York City without destroying one brick, one child in the city. Suppose you came upon a scene that's animated, not like this because you're all attentive, you're animated but you're attentive, but an animated scene. Take a scene now, say Grand Central Station in New York City at rush hour. It's sheer pandemonium. Or the stock market when it's going down or up, and there's an exchange of, say, 13 million shares in the course of a day. To see that scene, it's the most fantastic thing. I saw it when it was only 8 million shares in the exchange, but I thought I was in Bedlam. Everyone is mad about $1, and they're watching this state, and they're moving back and forth, just like bees. Now, suppose you came upon that scene, animated as it is, and as you looked at it, you knew that if you arrested an activity within you, everything would stand still. You did, and everyone was frozen. If you release it, they continue their intention. No matter how long you held it, a second, a minute, an hour, they will continue their intentions. But suppose as you arrest the activity within you, you change their intention. Just imagine, you change their intention and then release it. With the changed motivation, they move under compulsion to fulfill what they now think they've initiated. They think their ideas are completely original and that they have initiated it. Put that now into a vast picture of an army, tens of millions, seeking the destruction of you, the center of your country, and your country. If you could arrest the activity as it's poised to hit, and having arrested it, you change their intention, you could make them all, like lemmings, run towards the ocean beyond their depths and start them breathing under the depths and drown them all. That's what you could do. But you will not do it with this power because no one is sent in to do it until he is first incorporated into the body of love. It's only God playing all the parts. But that's the power. I have tasted of that power at intervals since he has sent me into the world. Just at intervals, I tasted of it, arresting the activity that seems so independent of me to discover that it really isn't independent of me at all. The forms are, but not their life, that their life is in me and I am activating my world. And so, As the Father has life in himself, so he has granted the Son also to have life in himself. Now here is how the one who is sent into the world calls his disciples. No man cometh unto me, save my Father calls him, but no one. John 6:40-44. So I will start on the surface of my being, and I will teach of the infinite power of your own wonderful human imagination. To what extent do you believe? For many are called, but few are chosen, Matt 22:14, because many will say, "Oh, I believe," and give you lip service. So I do not listen to what they tell me on the surface. "Oh, I believe it, they'll say. I am not the judge. He didn't send his Son into the world to judge anyone. He didn't send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world may have life, everlasting life, and be saved through him. John 3:17. No one who believes in him is condemned, and those who do not believe are already condemned because they didn't believe in the name of the Son of God. Well, the name means nature. The nature of this Son of which I speak now is power, for Jesus Christ in Scripture is defined as the power and the wisdom of God. 1 Cor 1:24. So when you stand in the presence of power and you are sent by the power of God, and the power of God is Jesus Christ. He then is the Father, and he expects the talent given to you to be wisely invested. When you come back with the investment doubled, he may say, "Well done, my faithful servant. Enter into the joy of the Lord." For you went out regardless of what others would say, and you told it just as it was told to you, just as you experienced it. Now let me show you how they are selected. In the depths of the soul, they are selected. A week ago, last Friday night, this lady took to bed this message she heard from this platform and said, "I found myself in a far, far place. It was so remote, both in place and in time. I did not understand anything that I saw or heard. Suddenly, the confusion ceased, and I was in a huge, huge room with glass-fronted walls and marble pillars. It was practically empty, except for the chair where I was seated. Then I felt I was expecting someone, who I did not know, but I had the feeling I was expecting someone. Then a carriage drove up. It was undoubtedly self-propelled. It was a carriage of a different period, but not a horse-drawn vehicle. It was undoubtedly self-propelled. The door opened, and out stepped a man who embodied power. He was the embodiment and personification of power and authority. He was a tall man with gray curly hair. He was wearing an Inverness cape and carrying a small attaché bag. He moved swiftly into the room where I was and walked over. There was no greeting, and he began to talk, that's all. And here was the embodiment of power speaking, and he was only talking about power. Here was a lesson in power. And Neville, he was you. I was looking at you, and suddenly I knew he was God. I said to myself, he is God, and he is Neville. He continued speaking about power. Sheer power, unadulterated power. I was saying to myself, he is God, and he is Neville. Then he came to the end of what he was saying. There was no recognition of my presence at all. When he was through talking, he turned around, walked back, made his exit, and as though by appointment, the carriage came into sight. He entered the carriage, and as soon as he entered, they disappeared. They vanished suddenly. I was bewildered. I woke up completely bewildered, awestruck. I went to the bathroom. I came back to my bed saying, I must tell this to Neville. Went back to bed and redreamed the dream. But this time, it is as though I am remembering the dream in the dream, and I'm making every preparation to tell it to you. So I start, and as I start to tell it to you, I find a ticket office. I move toward the ticket office, and my friend Marge Broom is there. Just as I meet her, something struck me in the forehead between my eyes and just above the eye, and it was painful, a sharp pain. I saw it, it looked like a stone, so I picked it up. It was about 3 or 4 inches long, and about 3/4 of an inch thick. It was a polished topaz, with gold buried all through it, embedded in the entire piece. As I'm showing it to Marge, a man walks over, looks at it and says, "It's valuable. You could cut it up into pieces and get quite a lot of money for it." She said, "That commercial idea appealed to me, and so I took it and put it in my purse." Then we started towards the ticket office. I must get to Neville to tell him this dream. Suddenly Marge disappears. I look for my car, and the car has disappeared. I open my purse, and the purse is empty. There is no money, and there is no topaz. I'm saying to myself, what will I? And then I arrested the thought. She was about to say, "What will I use for money?" She arrested the thought. She said, "I will go within, and I will imagine I'm with Neville." And immediately she was in my home, and she's telling me the dream. She reached the point of the dream just before she remembered the teaching on how to imagine when the doorbell rang. Through the door came a group of joyful, laughing, wonderful people, youth personified in numbers. It was time for me to take my walk and for her to leave, she said, leaving frustrated because she didn't share in the dream how she remembered the teaching and applied it successfully. As she woke, she said, "I was thinking that I would tell you on Monday." Well, she did. She brought the letter on Monday night, last Monday night, so when I went home, I could read it. This was so vivid to her that she woke saying, "I must tell him. I'll tell Neville on Monday." That's how one is chosen. In the depths of the soul, my Father calls the 12. My work isn't complete until the 12 are called. There'll be 70, and there'll be more, but not until 12. One who in a dream applies it, one who has actually seen the truth of what I am saying, that God himself sent me, and he sent me when he was wearing the garment of power. So when that man came in and began to talk on power, he himself embodied power, he radiated power. He was Neville, and yet he was God. So I can say this to you, and you know my weaknesses as a man, and you'll say, "Oh silly, come on, give us something else, tell us something else." And so many will give me lip service. But in the depths of the soul, you don't give me lip service. In the depths of the soul, it unfolds and you know who I am. But I tell you, I'm not unique. So are you. The day will come when you too will be called, and you too will be embraced into the body of God in the form of love. You too will be sent, but sent by power. If I were sent when he wore the garment of love, I would tell you nothing but the garment of love. But I wasn't. I was sent when he was wearing the garment of power. He wore the garment of Jesus Christ, for Jesus Christ is the power and the wisdom of God. So I have been telling it since it happened. What greater power is there in this world than to be able to affect the fulfillment of desire? She had no friends, no car, no money, and no topaz, but she remembered a power that I am talking about. She exercised it, and instantly, without any means of transportation, she was in my home, telling me her dream. That is the use of power. If you had all the power known to man, like nuclear power or the power of wealth, well, that's an enormous power, but it's nothing. It's a firecracker. Today, a man with $2 billion can't buy respect. There are people tonight throwing their whole future away because they are playing it on this level. They think they're very smart, and they make one tiny slip. With all their multiple millions, they can't redeem it. They can't buy back the respect of the people whose confidence they lost by one tiny political slip. Watch it happen right before your eyes now. But those who know this power can apply it without any background, without any billions behind them to put them into office, and just dwell in the office as though it were true. What would it be like were it true? Let me dwell in it, just as though it is true, and in a way that no one knows that power will take them, without money, without a topaz, without a friend, without a car, into office, and they will fill it. That is what I'm talking about. That is what I've been sent to tell you of the power of God, and that power of God is personified in Scripture as Jesus Christ. People have made of this a little fetish and made some little icon and called that Jesus Christ. I am not speaking of that little Jesus Christ. I'm speaking of a power that is resident in man. That's the power that I was sent to tell you about. This is Jesus Christ. And when he sent me, he never left me. So those who see me see him who sent me. So when she saw the power that sent me, she saw me. She saw him who sent me, and I'm just like him. He sent me into the world, and he and I are one. He never left me. When I leave here now, to whom do I go? I go back to the one who sent me, and he and I are one. We will both return as one, back into the body of ourselves, called love. This is the story as I read it in Scripture and as I've experienced it in my own mystical manner. So here I can say to her, you have been called from the very depths, for you met it. You proved in the far regions of your mind that you were faithful to the word. And Father, I have given them the words that thou gavest me, and they have received them, and they know in truth that I came from thee. They have believed that thou didst send me. Well, she knows it now from actual experience. She saw the power personified. She knew it was God, and yet she knew it was Neville. So she knows I haven't lied to her, that I have kept the faith and told it just as it happened to me. She had to experience it in the depths of her soul and know that it is true. Now, here is another story. We speak of symbols in the world. Everything is a symbol. I don't care what it is. Your mother's a symbol. Your father's a symbol. All symbols. This lady writes, "The dream started, and I am in a huge big dormitory. All the girls are present. I can say I was present, but really in another sense I wasn't because I was just about to leave. But I had my own room, my own space, rather. And they are all talking about someone losing a child. They all had a chart, and there were 12 days, and each day had a certain letter to the day. The first initial of that day was simply the first letter in the event to be experienced that day. So this was the day on this person's chart, and it was a K. And so her child was kidnapped. She began to explain to me and to all the others, see, she had to experience this day, because here is her chart. She began to bawl her out, and bawl all the others out who believed this trash. She began to explain, you don't have to experience these things. You can revise the entire day. Who told you that you must limit yourself by a chart and have 12 days, each day with a letter, and that first letter is going to be the first letter of the experience of the day? This is nonsense. She began to explain the art of revision, the power of imagining. Then she said, she told the woman, you don't have to lose your child. You can get the child back. And she explained it in detail. Then she said, they all seemed so dotty, so I simply took my own child and I left. I went off into a long journey with so many people. I met so many travelers, and then I decided to return. So I came back to find the place that I occupied is now occupied by another woman. Everything is as it was, minus 1 or 2 little changes she made. But she is doing the same thing I did, playing the same part I played, doing over and over as all the others were doing, playing the same part I played. I noticed that the library was changed. Instead of my books, she had replaced my books with her books, and my books were placed under the bed. My books were all encyclopedias. So I said to her in the most forceful manner, get my books out and put them back where they belong, and take those books away. That's what she did in her dream. Then she said, there was a joyful state where everyone was singing because my grandmother is coming. Now she said, I must go aside, this is not the dream. But I must tell you, my most joyful early childhood was spent with my grandmother. She was the essence of what a grandmother should be in the life of every grandchild. I think of all the things she cooked, the lemon pies. I think of the Indian summers. I think of the hot houses. I think of the flowers, of all the lovely things and an abundant overflowing of love. So my childhood was swamped with love because of my grandmother. When they said my grandmother was coming, I was excited. And here comes my grandmother who died in 1962. Now this is 1968 where this takes place. She comes in and she is at least 15 years younger. At least 15. But she said here, I've never known her so vital. She must have died when she was a young person, because she's still a very young person today. So 15 years off would be considerable if you are one who loses a grandmother at a young age. For she died in 62, but in 62, which was 6 years ago, she'd still be a very young person. So she said she was 15 years younger. Her hair was thicker, her eyes were bright, everything about her vital. I've never known such vitality in my grandmother. She came up with open arms and she embraced me, and we kissed. I could feel the coolness of her skin. I could feel her lips against my lips as we kissed and embraced. And while I'm holding her and feeling the thrill of my grandmother, she becomes rigid. She drops in my hands, and she's dead. She falls to the floor. Everyone is concerned and sad about it, and I am overly joyful. She falls to the floor, and then I see it for what it really is, the symbolism of my life, the part she played in my life, and this is an eternal part. Then I realize who I am when she fell to the floor and then just simply vanished. She not only fell, but she disappeared from the floor. All around me are sad, and I am not sad at all. Here is the most marvelous experience. One who has had the experience of arresting an activity and starting it again is tasting the power of the life to come, the power of the new age. She sees that everything here is really dead. Everything here is a symbol, and we are playing parts. She now knows it from experience. She goes back to the old state to find it is the same thing over and over with a slight modification. She tries to bring it back to its former state by retrieving the books from under the bed, but she gives up. It means nothing. She goes out to meet the grandmother, finding her alive, young, wonderful, and vital. After the embrace and the kiss, she then drops. So I tell you, I've been sent to tell you who you really are. Sent to tell you of a power of which you may be totally unaware, that you do not need a social, intellectual, financial, or any other background to achieve your goals. You may have all of these tonight and fail in your objective. You may not have any of those things and still realize your objective if you believe. So, do you believe in him? He said, "What is the work of God? To believe in him whom he has sent." John 6:29. Well, believe in whom? Believe in Neville as a man? No. Believe in my word. Believe what I have told you. I have told you of a power. That power is Jesus Christ. So when I say believe in Jesus Christ, I'm not asking you to believe in Neville, a man. You might find me tonight in some environment which you will condemn, because you think that is not a place where he should be seen, and therefore you have no faith in what he teaches. But divorce the man from what he is telling you, and believe in what he is telling you. His word is the word of his Father, and his Father is Jesus Christ, and he's one with his Father. They are one. He was always in the company of tax collectors and sinners, and they condemned him for that. They knew his physical origin. They said, "Where are you from?" And he said, "I've told you, but you wouldn't believe me." They said, "Who is your father?" He said, "You wouldn't know. If you knew me, you would know my Father also. But you know neither me nor my Father. My Father is he whom you call God, but I know my Father, and you know not your God." And so they took up stones to stone him, because they did not believe his ultimate origin. They saw the physical origin. Yes, anyone can investigate this and its physical origin. It's recorded on the little island. It's there in the book. They were taken at that time when I was born, the records of birth and the records of baptism, so these are there. You can see them. That's my physical origin. So when you go back, he said, "I know his father, his mother, his brothers, his sister. We know these things. But do you know my ultimate origin? Do you know him who sent me? And do you know the phrase, 'him who sent me,' is used on his lips 25 times in the Gospel of John? 25 times. He's always referring to him who sent me, and no one can follow him. So if in the depths you begin to exercise what you have heard, that you actually exercise it and prove it in the dream, as she did, instantly, immediately, she's in my home telling me the dream. And that's how they are called. They aren't called on the surface at all. Not one is called, because the whole drama is supernatural. It did not take place here on earth, not in the sense of secular history. It takes place while man walks the earth. It takes place in the deeper regions of the individual, and that's where it occurs. So he didn't call Peter while he was fishing in the waters of this land, and then call Andrew, John, James, and all the others. No, these are simply symbolic of the states of mind that heard, believed, and in the depths it happened. They were called that way. But no man on the surface is calling them. For you would call them by appearance and think, now, isn't she lovely? Or isn't he lovely? And she is rich, and he is rich, and they would give so much to the cause. That's what they're all doing. So you go to church, and the best pews, until recently, were always reserved for the rich. I know when I was a boy, we didn't have much money, but we had a little position, so we had our own pew. The name Mrs. Goddard was on it, and no one dared sit in the pew. She came with her brood every Sunday morning. We all had to come, reluctantly, but we came. Mother led the whole bunch of us in, and the little name marked Mrs. Goddard's pew. Today that's a thing of the past because reserved or bought pews are no longer allowed. However, even though the name is not allowed on it, it is still an unwritten rule in many proper churches. They still reserve places for those who have large sums of money. The minister, if he sees their face on a Sunday morning, tears up what he had intended to say and speaks what they want to hear, or they aren't going to get a large donation. I know this from experience, for it came to me out of the horse's mouth in New York City. St. Luke's is a marvelous hospital in New York City, and next to it is St. John the Divine, the unfinished cathedral. It's the biggest thing and a really beautiful piece of work. Then there is St. Thomas, the cathedral on Fifth Avenue, all Episcopal. The hospital St. Luke's is run by the Episcopal Church. This lady was going to give St. Thomas $2 million if the bishop was not still alive, Bishop Manning. Well, the old boy outlived her, so she gave it to St. Luke's. The hospital fell heir to $2,000. Now that's a Christian. She thought she was working her way right into the arms of God, and he would say, "I never heard of you, do not know who you are." She thought by that very generous gift of $2,000 either to one place, provided, of course, that the old boy was dead. If he was dead, the church would get it. If he wasn't dead, the hospital would get it, and yet they are both one. Here is this little person with millions of dollars, and she gave $2,000 to either one or the other, provided one was dead, and if he hadn't died, the other one got it. That is what goes on in all these so-called proper churches. Where do you go? Well, you must leave that and go to this church. Because if you meet the right people and do these things, and that's called Christianity. Well, I wasn't sent to tell you that. I was sent to tell you of the real Christ, and the real Christ is your own wonderful human imagination. There is nothing impossible for Christ. You don't need anything else. All I can say is test yourself and see whether you are holding to the faith. We think we are, and suddenly something comes up and I wonder, well, who can I interest in this venture of mine? Where could I turn? And we do not turn to Christ. When she found herself without a friend, Marge was gone. No car, no transportation to my home, no money to get there. She's in the ticket office. No topaz that she can break up into pieces and sell. Then she remembers. She went within and imagined herself in my home, and immediately she was in my home. She met the test, and therefore she's called. I've got to go back with my work completed. He sent me, and he is drawing into my world those who will fill the bill, and when it is completed, it could be this night, I will go. For she had a double dream, bear that in mind. The 41st chapter of Genesis. The doubling of the dream means that the thing has been fixed by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass, verse 32. So this dream being doubled, it has a double jet of truth in it. She has met the test. That was the most important thing in it, that she met the test. In her dream, she imagined herself in my presence, and immediately she's with me in my home. The second is that she came into the circle. I do not feel it can be long. It will shortly come to pass. I came out from the Father and I came into the world. Now I am leaving the world and returning to the Father. John 16:28. So I take in this dream of hers that shortly it must come to pass. And just as I vanished without leaving a trace, just vanished, it will come in that manner. I take it in her revelation that she has met the test, and my departure, I cannot see how it can be long delayed. But it cannot be until I have finished the work that he gave me to do. Then I can say, I have finished the work that thou gavest me to do. Now return unto me the glory that was mine, the glory that I had with thee before the world was. John 17, verse 4. For I came out from you, that is pre-existence, and I came into the world, wearing a garment of flesh. I've done the work which you gave me to do, to form the nucleus and to see that they believe in you, which is their own wonderful human imagination. They will not turn to a false god. They will keep that God alive in them. Then, reach the 70 and reach a 44, and go on from there. When the work is done, one has to depart. I take comfort in her vision that it shall shortly come to pass. Now here, believe me, it's the most glorious story ever told, man. The story of how God became man, so that man may become God. But man must be told over and over who this God is that became him, that he is all imagination. That is the real man, and the imagination of his is God. That is the powerhouse of the world. Infinite power resides in your imagination. Just imagine that you are now imprisoned, and they've thrown away the key, and you can imagine yourself where you want to be. Believe in the reality of your imaginal act. If it took armies to release you, it would make no difference to you. but you will get out, uninjured, and you will find yourself where you have imagined yourself to be. Well, isn't that a far greater power than bribing your way out and then being sent back in because you're caught bribing and doing all the things that violate the laws of Caesar? He never violated one law of Caesar. Do you pay taxes? Give me a coin. Whose inscription is this? It's Caesar's. Well then, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's. Mark 12:14. But they want so much. All right, make that much more and give it to them. It makes no difference. And so he wants this, he wants that, he wants the other. That's told to you in the book of Samuel. As long as you have a God outside of self, he's going to impose upon you every limitation in the world. Read it carefully in the book of Samuel. They wanted a king, and he warned them what would happen if they expected a king and took a king. But they wanted to be like other people and have a leader over them. He said that first of all, he'll take your maidservants, and he'll take all your male servants, and your sons and your daughters. He'll take your money, and when he's taken everything from you, then he'll take you. In that day that he takes you to enslave, as he has all the others, you will cry out to be saved from a god of your own choosing. But in that day I will have no ear to hear you. 1 Sam 8:11. But in spite of the warning, they still say, give us a king over us. So they chose Saul. With all the warning that came from the prophet Samuel, they insisted on Saul. Well, Saul enslaved them, exactly as was foretold. You want a king, or you want a leader, or you want a dictator, and see what happens, whether it be in Cuba, Russia, any place, even in our land. And suddenly, all the things come upon us, and we simply fulfill Scripture. When it comes to this power, listen to these words. For they knew he embodied infinite might, and he turned to those who would have him exercise it. He said, do you think that I cannot now pray to my Father, and he will at once send more than 12 legions of angels? But how should Scripture be fulfilled? Must it not be so? Matt 26:53. He came promising himself and the one who sent him that he would not exercise it in such a way. He would subject himself to all the limitations of the flesh and abide by the will of him who sent him, and drink that cup to the very bitter end. Every drop, no matter what happened to him, all the disgrace. Let them call him a phony. Let them call him everything under the sun. Time will prove that he was God walking the earth. And so he drank the cup to the bitter end, although he could have called, or he could have exercised the power, and at once to his rescue would be more than 12 legions of angels. But he said, no, I will drink it to the very last drop, and then return to him who sent me, and then we are one. And he will say to me, having done exactly what I was commissioned to do, enter my faithful servant into the joy of the Lord. Matt 25:21-23. And there is no joy like it, none, when you once more are reincorporated into the body of love. For you return to the body of might and then into the body of love. Now let us go into the silence. Are there any questions? Well, my dear, you and you alone are the judge of what happened, you and you alone. No one fools the Father, and the Father in you knows exactly what he did at that moment you now describe. Dwell upon it. If it was a thing of love, a thing of tenderness, dwell upon it, cherish it, and lean against it in times of trouble. I only know what the lady told me in her letter of Monday night, which came to her between the hours of Friday night and Saturday morning in a fantastic experience. For you're told in Scripture, I'm only here to talk about Scripture. He who sees me sees him who sent me. I told you that the God of power sent me, and she has seen it. He never left me. We are one. So she actually saw it. When the man stepped out and came in, clothed in his cape, and may I tell you, the night I was taken into the divine assembly, that's how they all were dressed. They all wore capes. I can't tell you why, but they all wore capes. All right, Ina, well, thank you. And may I say congratulations, my dear, congratulations. I wouldn't question that for one moment, because the spirit in you knows exactly what happened, and I wouldn't question it. That happened before you heard of me or met me. All right, well then, cherish it, my dear. Who am I to deny a spiritual experience of anyone? I'm here to encourage it, just to encourage it. What has happened here in this particular experience is she was fulfilling Scripture, because I have said you are going to actually know that he sent me. Well, who sent you? God. Which God? There's only one God. When he sent me, he was all power. He wore the garment of almightiness. When he sent me, he did not wear the garment of infinite love. That preceded it, so that I could be trusted to tell this story of power. No one is going to exercise it until he's first incorporated into the body of love. You can just imagine what havoc he could wreak in this world if he was not motivated by love but had such power at his fingertips. Just imagine what he could do. I have tasted of that power. It's frightening. People who think that they are alive are animated. They do not have life in themselves. They have life. They are living souls, but not life-giving spirits. Man is destined to be a life-giving spirit where he stops and starts the world that he observes, and those in it are totally unaware of being stopped. If you arrested it for an hour, they wouldn't know that the passage of time was 1 hour. They would awaken as though they hadn't even arrested, as though they hadn't even napped, and continue in their intention. To arrest it and change the motivation, what power! What horror it would be if man was not first incorporated into the body of love. That is the first incorporation, and then comes power. Jesus Christ is power, sheer, unadulterated power. If you read John correctly, the 8 signs recorded were not done with compassion. They were the demonstration of power. There was no compassion whatsoever shown in what they call the signs in John. They are simply power. I know when I walked into this enormous crowd, thousands of them were waiting for me, and when I came by, they were instantly cured. Eyes came out of nowhere, hands, ears, all the missing parts appeared and remolded themselves onto faces that were completely distorted. Everything on their bodies was made perfect. There wasn't anything asked of me. I simply walked by, and being one with perfection, everything in my world had to be perfect. It was not compassion that prompted it. This happened to me in 1946. In John, there is no compassion that prompts the signs. He just demonstrates power. He turns to one, "What have I to do with thee? Fill the jars with water, now draw." And they draw wine. "What have I to do with thee?" He's turning to his mother and speaking. There's no compassion in that voice. Nor to the servants, "Fill the stone jars with water." And she said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you to do." So they filled the stone jars with water. "Now serve it." And a wine far better than they ever had before comes from the jars that only contained water, a demonstration only of power, no compassion. So I tell you, until one is incorporated into the body of love, one will not be sent. An apostle is one who is sent, but only after incorporation in the body of love. He never fails even for a moment, whether he sleeps or wakes, that sense of being sent. It moves with him throughout the day and night. That sense of being sent is never foreign to him. It's part of his personality, for he is sent. Whether one believes it or not, it really makes no difference to him, because he knows where he stood and how he was sent. I was sent by sheer might. He didn't open his lips, didn't use any vocal cords. He simply thought the words and I heard them. The words were, "Time to act." That was the emphasis. Now, God only acts and is in existing beings or men. So, when I say, do you believe it? Well, then if you really believe it and you're confronted with a decision, you'll act. If you don't really believe it, you don't act. You begin to ruminate, what shall I do? Just as she caught herself saying, what am I going to use for? And she stopped herself. She could have said, what will I use for money? Have no car. My friend is gone. The money is gone. The topaz is missing. What will I use? She stopped it. She arrested the thought in a dream. I'll go within and imagine that I am with Neville, and immediately she is with me in my home telling me her dream, that she has met the test. And so, she is now a follower in the true sense of the word, a disciple. Good night.